We're delighted to have all of you here. Welcome to our most recent career lunch, and I could wait. I'm sure there will be some more people popping in, but I don't want to deprive the students of any opportunity to spend even more time with Osagie Imasogie, just because he is such what I will say is such a supporter, a pillar of what we do here at Penn and at the school. But even more importantly, he's just such a wonderful a person to talk to. He's so knowledgeable about these areas, and he's very passionate about his advocacy. What I love is there was a recent Philadelphia magazine feature on him saying life sciences venture capitalist Osagie Imasogie on passion, diversity, and the need to fail fast. Nice title. I think it captures you very nicely, and it's a really, really beautiful idea. Just to give you an idea of the breadth, how much we as an institution owe Osagie, he is currently the chair of the board of advisors here at Penn Law. He's a member of the Board of Trustees, which is the governing body of the entire university. And all of us who've passed through the Sansom Street entrance know that we passed through the Imasogie Gateway. And so we're well aware of his support and generosity for the school. But more importantly, he's a deep supporter of students. He teaches intellectual property and national economy value creation and is very much engaged with all the students' lives. And I think where his contribution, I think, is the most deeply felt by the students. In addition, this is a chance to get to know him on a bit of his other side, which is on the professional aspects. He's had the kind of breadth of career which I didn't know was possible when I was a law student, and is to me epitomizes why we do these career lunches. I mean, we can see OCI and going through being an associate and eventually becoming a partner in a firm, but then you look at the scope of what Osagie's done. Started off as an attorney in Schneider Harrison, but then went to Price Waterhouse as a corporate finance partner, and then into senior commercial R&D positions with GlaxoSmithKline, DuPont, Merck, other companies, Endo, where he was a founding general counsel and SVP for corporate development, but then really worked for an incubator for VC within a larger company and has become a serial entrepreneur in the life sciences areas. Currently, the big titles. Co-founder and senior managing partner of PIPV Capital, chairman of the board of Zolira Therapeutics, and we were just chatting. He's, among other things, worked with Franklin Square KKR, and now is acting as the independent director for 16 billion under management. What you think you said earlier. I mean, this is
Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit whatever the number's big, and so to me, this is the emerging edge of what we're doing. He has a lot of degrees from very distinguished schools, including the London School of Economics, but his last degree was from Penn because he knew once he went to school there was never going to be another school that'd be worth
enough.
Osagie, thank you for joining us today.
All right.
We're welcome. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As usual, Chris is being way too kind with his words, and I appreciate that. It's a pleasure seeing all of you. Quite a number of you I know because you've gone through the pain of surviving my class. I was still in it now. So I apologize up front for you seeing my ugly face yet again. Instead of once a week, it's bad enough as it is. But listen, thank you for inviting me. My story is not, well, let me phrase it this way. My story is the quintessential Penn Law story, right? The whole idea of interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary education, the whole idea that there are perspectives that are valuable, and those perspectives lead to skill sets that are equally valuable, and that those skill sets are portable. Okay? And that's kind of what Penn Law represents. My students have heard me say this many, many times that, prior to your conception till after your death, the law governs you. So there's not a single facet of human endeavor that is not regulated by the law. What that means is that if you have proper legal training, there's not a single facet of human endeavor that you cannot opine on and provide leadership on. And it is that philosophy that has animated what I've done with my career. I mean, Chris is right. I've gone through 5 different professions, so I practice law, which is always a great training. It's a fantastic training. I must tell you, each of those 5 professions I loved intensely, and I enjoyed tremendously. And I urge you, as you think about your careers, that you do that because it matters. And I'll give you one weird example on that. So, practice law, great training, became a partner in Pricewaterhouse in corporate finance, which I really enjoyed because it covered the whole range of corporate finance work. Went into the pharmaceutical industry at a senior level, managing, of all things, groups in R&D. I actually ran multiple groups in R&D in big pharmaceutical companies like GSK and SmithKline. In manufacturing, in legal, and ran global international business for DuPont and DuPont Merck. Then went into private equity and the whole range of private equity and venture. And right now I'm involved in a number of other things, other industries, everything from obviously the biotech pharmaceutical industry to financial institutions. So I sit on 3 boards of financial institutions, and in total, we manage around $28 billion. So, a little bit of money. But what is consistent in each one of those is that the basic skill sets that have enabled me to do that are the basic skill sets you learn in law school. The ability to process a huge amount of information, the ability to identify what is most important in a relatively short period of time amongst that huge amount of information, the ability to articulate an argument around it, and the ability to communicate that in a manner that other people resonate with, and it convinces them. It's the same skill set. And so what I tell people when I talk about careers, I did that because I'm very, very curious, and I'm still very curious. So I went through multiple careers. You will do it as a matter of necessity. I don't think you have a luxury. I don't think you have a choice. Because the world has changed fundamentally. And one of the biggest changes is time. Time has actually compressed. And the consequence of that is that industries are disappearing and reappearing very quickly. So the idea that you can be one thing in a career, I think that is absolutely gone. So the likelihood that in your career you will go through at least the numbers that I've gone through is pretty high. So I do think that what then becomes important are probably 2 things, right? The first one is orientation. How do you see yourself? Because it's how you see yourself that gives you the flexibility to drive what you end up doing. So if you see yourself as a lawyer, well, you kind of put yourself into a nice little box, haven't you? What I like to think about is, I use metaphors. Maybe nowadays it may not be socially acceptable, but let me use as neutral a metaphor as I can. It's unlikely that anyone on this call has just one pair of shoes. I think it's relatively unlikely. So if you're going to the beach, you may wear flip-flops. If you're going to a black tie event, you may wear something else. So what is interesting about that is that you own all those shoes, and they're in your wardrobe. So if I see you on the beach, there's no way I would think of you as being the person that only has flip-flops. I mean, it would be illogical for me to think that. Well, why don't you think about what you do as a set of skills that are shoes in your wardrobe? I have the skill to process information in this way. Well, that's one of my pair of shoes. I have the skills to do this. That's another pair of shoes, and so on and so forth. If you think about it in that way, then you, by definition, are not defining yourself as one thing or the other, but simply as an individual that has a set of skills that you can deploy. And the skills are not mutually exclusive. So I can do all of them, or I can do one of them. It depends on what I need. And so the things that are going to drive what happens with your career is your orientation. You've got to start with the right orientation. And the second thing is what I like to call bridges. Why do I love bridges so much? If you think about it, it's a fascinating construct, isn't it? It takes you from the known to the unknown. When you're coming onto a bridge, on this side of the bridge, you know where you are. But until you cross that bridge, you know, the next place you're not quite sure about. So as you move from career to career, you need to construct bridges. And you know, most bridges are built from both sides. And that's the way you really do a bridge effectively. So again, I would urge you to think about that. So as I was practicing law, I was doing a lot of corporate finance work. And it became logical to me that, wait a minute, why am I selling my time by the hour? How does that make sense? If a client has a problem, if he has a $10 million problem, we actually have a conflicting interest if I charge him by the hour, because for me to make more money, I want to spend more hours on it. But for him, as a businessman, he wants the matter resolved immediately so he can move on. So why don't I align myself with my with my client and get a piece of the action? At which case, he knows exactly what he's going to pay me. It's a percentage of the deal. I know exactly what I'm going to earn, and we are both interested in getting it done like yesterday, because I want to go and do my next deal, and he wants to move on with his business. So that became a logical way for me to create a bridge to go into corporate finance. And I liked certain industries, and pharmaceuticals was a fascinating industry. And that was a logical way to say, I have a skill set that I can use in that industry. So I would say, look, the two things you should keep in mind is your orientation and your ability to create bridges. I think the better use of our time is for me to answer any questions you may have. And then at the end, Chris asked me to think about what am I keeping my eye on? What do I think could be quite material coming around the curve? I do have a view on that. So, but before then, why don't you guys ask me any questions you want, and I will be more than glad to answer.
Terrific. Thank you very much for a great start. And just if you're able to use the raise hand feature, it's just an easy one to use to keep us all from talking over each other.
I think Katya has
first.
a question, yes.
Yeah, Katya, just so you know, Osagie, she's a 1L. So she's at the beginning of her law school journey.
Good.
I'm also a JD MBA, so I am the quintessential sort of hybrid, don't know what to do, polymath of many interests kind of character. But my question was, I actually have two. One is, how do you know when it's time to reinvent yourself, pivot? I think that's key. And second, you seem to have done a wonderful job of convincing others to allow you to make that pivot. And I'd love to know your secret there.
Okay, so how do you know? Two things about how do you know. The first thing, I can tell you what my timeframes have been. It is going to differ from person to person, but I can tell you what mine have been. Roughly 3 years. I've moved in 3 to 4 year windows usually, and the reason is I get bored. I'm a very curious person, and I get bored. But here's what is important. As I said, two things on that. Remember I said at the beginning that it's important that you have passion and you really enjoy what you're doing. Every time I go into a different career, I dove in on the deep end. I went all the way in, absolutely in. And I literally turned myself into a sponge, and I soaked up as much as I could in the shortest possible time, because I knew that I was going to move. So I wanted to become really, really good in whatever I was doing. So let me tell you a crazy story. So when I was finishing up at Penn, I had several job offers, none of them in Philadelphia. And I was, big firms in Washington and in New York, and that was it. And one of the partners at Schneider, this was way before cell phones. So I left Penn in '85. So just to put it into context. One of the partners at Schneider apparently had heard about me from several faculty members and reached out to me. And this was before cell phones. So, so ultimately I get a letter saying, Mr. So-and-so would very much like to speak with you. I was like, all right. So I respond and he says, I would like you to come in. We would like to talk to you. I was pretty cocky little, rot, right? And I said, sure, why not? So I go in. I thought I was gonna go in for an hour. I already had my jobs. What was I gonna do? I spent the whole day at Schneider. I got to meet, at that time, the last living name partner was still around, Old Man Siegel and his brother. And I got to meet all the senior partners. I spent the whole day. I went from department to department. And at the end of the day, they sat me down in a room and said, we'd like to make you an offer. One day, one visit. And I said, no, thank you very much. But I already have jobs in Washington. I'm not staying in Philadelphia. And they said, what will it take? Yeah. So I was a little bit of an Oliver Twist. And I said, I would like this. They said, okay. I would like that. They said, okay. I would like that. And they said, okay. At which stage I said, okay. And that's how I joined Schneider. Now, one of the things I'd asked for was I wanted to be in the corporate department, and I wanted to be in the intellectual property department, and I wanted to be in the international department at the same time. And I wanted an office in Washington, and I wanted an office in New York. I was a kid. I mean, I was a bloody associate, right? And so they said yes, right? So the chairman of the corporate department, who he and I became fast friends after a while, I go to him, and everyone hates blue sky law. I don't know whether any of you have ever done blue sky. It's a pain in the behind. It's state securities law, right? And in those days, again, this was all before computers. So you have to have the onion skin paper with big CCH black binders. And basically, if you're going to offer securities on a national level, you have to make sure that you could get exemptions in the various states so that you don't have to do registrations in those states for your securities offering. So you have to study every single state and figure out the loopholes you could find based on your offering. It's a tedious piece of work. Everybody hates it. And who gets stuck with it are young associates. So I go to the chairman of the department and I said, I'll cut a deal with you. I'm willing to do 50 states blue sky assignments back to back on the condition that if I complete that, you will never give me a blue sky assignment again. Because there were fourth year, fifth year associates who are, once in a while would be stuck with the blue sky assignment. And he said, you are crazy, but sure, which is what I did. So I dove in head first. I did my time, I did my blue sky, and I never did blue sky again. But even today, I still have a very good grasp of it. So So my point in issue is this. The time to go, my cycle has tended to be 3 to 4 years, but because I know that in the back of my mind, I've been very intense when I'm there, and I learn everything I can learn. So don't spend your time looking over the horizon. Spend your time becoming an expert in what you can do, wherever you are. The second one about convincing people. My mother's people, I'm Nigerian by birth, American by choice. And my mother's people are the Yorubas. And the whole philosophy of the Yorubas is not encapsulated in long treatises. It's encapsulated in something that the English language calls proverbs. That it's a long academic. Anyway, there's an academic book of over 5,000 of so-called Yoruba proverbs. So it's a philosophical orientation. So I see the world through that orientation. And one of the proverbs that is fundamental, and every one of my businesses, I start with the Yoruba proverb because it's a conceptual framework. Anyway, one of my main platform, my private equity firm, the Yoruba proverb I use for it is "Èèyàn ni owó ayé." Now, what that means in English is people are the currency of life. Since we're talking about intellectual property, I've actually trademarked that, so I own it. It's called Pat Call. People are the currency of life. And essentially, it's 100% relationship. So the story I told you about how I stayed at Schneider, 100% relationship. People are the currency of life. So the way you move from one place to the other, the way you are successful is you build reasonable relationships. And if you understand that, it will help you in everything you do, not just your career, right? So people end up, people have been extraordinarily supportive of my moves, but it's because we had a relationship. So I urge you to keep in mind that Pat Call really does work. Sometimes they call it the old girls network. Any other questions?
Zach has his hand up. Zach is at 3L, and he is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Law and Innovation, Osagie. So he's one of our finest.
Excellent.
Thanks, Professor Yu, and thank you for coming to talk to us today. One question I had, based on the story you just told, I think a lot of young lawyers will get pigeonholed into a certain type of law, and there'll be immense pressure from the law firm to really just become an expert in that one specific area, and not really getting a chance to try different areas like it sounds like you had an opportunity to do. Do you have a recommendation for how you keep a broad kind of set of work on your plate, or at least in your mind as you're moving forward throughout your career?
Yeah. So the answer to that is twofold. First things first, let's be crystal clear on this. Crystal clear. The law firm's primary objective is to make money. You are the means of production. Therefore, they have to be efficient in the use of their means of production. And you're kind of expensive, pay you a good chunk of money straight out of law school. And from their perspective, you can barely write your own name. But you think you are a hotshot Penn law graduate and you are the conqueror of the universe. Okay. They think they're going to have to spend some time training you. So understand their orientation, because you need to understand your orientation. It's a dance, right? You know they're going to make money off you, but you want to have a career. You want to develop yourself, okay? And somewhere in between those two views is what you do while you are in the law firm, okay? You have to be your own advocate. It's not anyone's job to work out a career plan for you. That's your job. Their job is to make sure that they give you work so that you can generate money, so that they can pay you what they pay you and have some left for them to share. Okay? So good example. Remember I said I was in 3 different departments? Well, the problem with me being in the intellectual property department is that in the US, unlike England and Europe, which is the system I had come from the landscape of economics, in Europe, there are intellectual property lawyers who then have a patent agent. So the patent agent does all the technical stuff. But the intellectual property lawyer, the solicitor, does all the strategy stuff around IP. So that's the background that I had. Whereas in the US, we have patent attorneys who have to take the patent bar. Well, in the world of intellectual property, there's a spectrum of intellectual property rights, right? Patents is just one of them. There's copyright, there's trademark, there's all confidential information, there's all this other stuff. For me, all the other stuff is more fun than just patents. So most law firms in their intellectual property department, the poor patent lawyers, they have to be given something to make it sweet for them. So patent work is tough and you have to have a technical degree, you have to do another bar. So some of them like to do a bit of trademark, a little bit of copyright, and that kind of balances it for them. So when an animal like me shows up that cannot do the technical patent work in the US, it means that I get all the fun stuff. So no one really likes me because I get to do the copyright and the trademark and the unfair competition and all that kind of stuff. So the poor chairman of the intellectual property department had to manage my ugly face within his department. I bugged him. I was in his office every single day. In fact, his admin became my best friend because he wouldn't give me work. Because giving me work would piss off his patent lawyers. And he eventually gave me work. It was a trademark deal. I came up with a great case for him, blew his mind. I became his best friend. In fact, at his funeral, I was asked by his family to speak at his funeral. And we were best friends. In fact, we published together. Can you imagine? Because I did some crazy work for him, and we actually published some articles together. So pat call and persistence works. Don't forget, it's your job to craft out your plan for your career, all right? But don't forget what the law firm is trying to do.
Next hand, Sander. Sander Vogt is an LLM student from Belgium. It occurs to me you may actually know many of these students already because of class, but I'll just go ahead and introduce them anyway, just in case you don't. Sander.
Thank
Hello,
you, Professor.
Sander.
Yeah, Professor Imasogie and myself, we know each other just like I know you, Professor Yu. I had a question, which is, you're probably going to answer this with Pat call, but I wanted to ask you what the value of the network that you built with fellow LLM students and JD students has been over the years for you and your career opportunities. I think a lot of us would also be interested in hearing, how that materialized for yourself.
I'll tell you a simple answer to that, Sander. Have never applied for a job. Never. It's always been, I know someone or my family knows someone. I don't enter into a room when there's not someone there waiting for me. So Pat call is not a theoretical statement for me. It's a core means by which I've lived my life. Networks are absolutely crucial. Look, most people do business with people that they know and people that they like. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? So building networks and engaging in networks are important. You have to be proactive in that process. You don't roll out of bed or stay behind closed doors and build a network. You have to be proactive. You have to go out. You have to go to events. You have to speak to people. Sounds strange, doesn't it? You have to build relationships. The other thing I would tell you, some of the most valuable connections I've made in terms of things that have resulted in significant financial returns have been off the beaten path. My mother's people say that, another proverb, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means we should listen twice as much as we talk. That's the ratio we should use. I'm an aggressive listener. What do I mean by that? How can you be an aggressive listener? You know, think about an orchestra. You've got the tubas, and then you've got the guy who's blowing the flute. A good orchestra conductor and a good audience member can actually hear both. That's been an aggressive listener. Many times you miss the most interesting person in the room because you're looking at the person that is waving his hand and saying, "Mommy, mommy, look at me, no hands." Those guys, 9 out of 10 times, the guy who's quiet on the other side, or the guy who has the most interesting question, that's the guy, that's the young lady you want to know. Because that person is going somewhere. That's a deep thinker. So when you talk about networks, think broad. You just never know. My last proverb for you on that question. My mother's people said that no market has a single entrance. So, you know, if you, for those who, I don't know whether any of you know about the Baha'i philosophy and the Baha'i faith, their places of worship have 12 different doors. So you never know which door will be the one to get you where you want to get to. So it's important that you have the key to as many doors as possible, and that's relationships. All right?
That's wonderful. Milad, another 3L hoop. I can't imagine, you probably ran across Osagie at some point, if I had to guess, but Milad.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to talk with us today. One question that I had, so you've talked a little bit about when you move on from an opportunity and how you don't apply for them, and so I would presume that you often have multiple opportunities to choose from for what you do next. Is there anything when you're evaluating among multiple things where you think, I have to have this in wherever I'm going next, or conversely, anything that would rule out an opportunity for you, that you would say, no, this absolutely, I cannot go to some place that does this?
So 2 things. Number one, my overarching drive is optionality. I'm a complete options person. I really am. Because again, I don't know which is shots on goals. I don't know which one's going to succeed. Anyone that tells you that they can see around the curvature of time and space, they're probably lying to you. Okay? It's a blind spot. But what I do know is that I don't make a goal unless I'm shooting. So I need as many shots on goals as possible. Okay? So that's the first thing. When I was thinking about making career moves, what was driving me is optionality. Which one gives me the most options? And that's the one I will go to next. Okay? The second thing, think strategically. So here's my view about law firms, right? Absolutely wonderful places to be trained. You can't beat it. It's a great place to be trained. Number 2, they pay you well. Thank you very much. Number 3, you check a box. Being at Penn, gone to a big law firm, check, you've checked the box. So strategically, this is the way I think about law firms. You know zilch in your first year. You know slightly more than zilch in your second year. By your third year, maybe you figure out how to get to the restroom and get back to your office. Okay. Now, at that stage, you need to start saying to yourself, is this for me? If the answer is yes, then you need to put all your energies to making partner. If the answer is no, then you need to put all your energies to making the next move. In my view, you then have 2 years to actualize whatever decision you make. If you are leaving the law firm, you better leave before your 5th year. Because if you are still there in your 5th year and you don't make partner, people think it's because you couldn't make partner. So to me, this is my strategy. It's not yours. I'm just telling you the way I was thinking this through. So between year 3 to 5, I'm either staying or I'm leaving. And I'm building my bridge. So every time I get into a new career, I work out a strategy with time frames on it as to what I intend to do. What do I need to learn? When are my break points in terms of I'm staying or I'm going? And then I focus on actualizing it. And then I learn as much as I can every moment I'm there. So that's the way I would respond to your questions.
So it's fascinating to me because I went to business school before I went to law school, and they teach you to be proactive in exactly that way.
Yeah.
The reality is, in 1991, 80% of us did not get jobs through OCI at a top 10 business school, and none of the tech industry came on campus. It just didn't. If you wanted a job there, you had to do it, and they taught us to be very proactive in ways that law school students don't have to be. But they also taught me to do exactly what you just said, Osagie, which is set a time frame, figure out what you want out of it. And I learned every 6 months, ask myself, why am I still here?
Yep.
And do I want my boss's job?
Yep.
And if the answer is no, it's a question of when, not if, and sooner is better than later. And
Yep.
most of us get happy and stay too long. And so if I'm still here, what do I want out of the next 6 months, year, 2 years? Or if I'm going along with it, I think that's very, very, it's how you take control of your career and lead your, approach it like your life depends on it, because it does.
Yep.
Instead of just letting it happen to you. And so I think this is just fantastic advice.
But have fun, learn as much as you can. Look, I gave a talk at my daughter's prep school for their graduation. I was their graduation speaker. And I used a phrase that my daughter and her friends still use against me till today. And the phrase that I used was, choose to be happy. Now, it seems a bit strange, right? Because people think happiness is an external thing. No, it's not. It's always internal. So you can, unless someone is putting a gun to your head and rolling you on the rack, you can choose to be happy. And therefore, the work you do, if you're going to do grunt work, choose to be happy with it. Why not? You're going to do it anyway. So learn as much as you can, do it, and move on. It makes it less tedious. Okay? And a lot of people choose not to be happy, and it makes their work so much harder. And the grunt work is really grunt work at that stage. So just keep that in mind. A lot happens with your mind and what you choose to do with your mind.
So this seems like a good moment to ask the second question I put in front of you, Osagie. What hot new thing or development are you tracking now that you think is going to be important?
Well, look, there are many things going on, but as you guys know, I really do love intellectual property. My poor students have heard me say this ad nauseum. I think it is the new global currency. I think it's the most important thing that is driving the global economy. Over 38% of the US GDP is predicated on knowledge-based economy. This is the single biggest driver. And it's also the one that has become so ubiquitous that so many people are totally unaware of it, which I think is scary stuff. because it has a tremendous amount of policy considerations, ethical considerations, social justice considerations, and we don't think about it deeply enough. And I think that is really problematic. That is in part, by the way, why Osagie and I have endowed a professorial chair at Penn on law and technology. I just think it's such a crucial issue. So one of the things that is happening right now, as we speak, that I think we should all be focused on and thinking deeply about is AI. AI is a problem. AI is a huge, huge problem. But it's also a huge, huge opportunity. You know that people like Stephen Hawking and before he passed away, and Elon Musk have made statements about AI being the worst thing, the most idiotic thing humans could possibly have done. So there's a lot going on, but think about what it does with regards to jobs. So this is supposed to be a career discussion. There's a philosopher. He's officially a historian, but I think he's more of a philosopher, called Yuval Harari. I don't know whether any of you have read his 3 books, right? I think his books, by the way, are great in the order in which you wrote them. I think Homo sapien is the best, and then Sapiens is the best, then Homo Deus, and then 21 Lessons from the 21st Century. Anyway, one of the things he's pointed out, and he's a historian by training, but he's a philosopher by orientation. One of the things he pointed out is that the impact of AI is going to lead to what he refers to as and he does this to be provocative, as a useless class. That is, a group of human beings that are not trainable and cannot be constructive from an economic perspective. And it's a very provocative statement. And he says that there are 99% of what humans do right now that AI will be able to do. And if that is the case, then what's the value proposition of humans? One of the things he points out is a piece of work. It's a nice little book called The Future of Employment, written by a guy called Carl Bendikit and Michael Osborne. And they kind of looked at what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years, which, by the way, is around the corner. That's kind of when the next 10 years is when you guys are peaking in your careers. So this is going to be disruptive. This is going to have a direct impact on you. And they kind of point out that things like, insurance, telemarketing, cashiers, even chefs, food, paralegals, lawyers to a certain extent. A lot of that is going to be wiped out by AI, or will lead to a different restructuring. So I think that one of the things that we have been discussing within our firm is, what is the best arbitrage? How do you best position yourself for what could be quite disruptive, both on a social level and an economic level, and ultimately that would mean on a political level? I'm thinking about right now in the US, there are over 3 million trucks. The industry generates trucking, freight the trucking portion of freight in the US, the industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Do you know what is actually happening right now? Self-driven trucks is the first true manifestation of self-driving. It's not the individuals, it's the trucks. Every one of those trucks ultimately takes away a job. And they were relatively well-paying jobs. And it's a job that you can get without a college degree. Some of the highest paying jobs you can get without a college degree, to be a commercial truck driver. And that is going to go boom. You don't have to feed the truck. It doesn't have to stop for bathroom breaks. Those who are supporting this industry are generating massive data about accidents and fatalities and delays, and they're putting forth an economic argument as to why you should go into a self-driven truck business. And if you don't, you will not be competitive, because your competition is going to have that. So this is not a futuristic discussion. This is what is happening right now. It's possible that in the next 5 years, you're going to start seeing a lot of self-driven trucks. And that's going to lead to what? Significant job loss. That could lead to significant social upheaval. So AI, I find particularly intriguing because its ramifications are much broader than most people think about. And remember, AI is not the movie, Android play. The bulk of AI is software, algorithms. You'll be shocked how much of your life is already directly controlled by AI. Everything from your phones to your credit scores to your job applications. And very few of us are thinking about this deeply enough and talking about it. And so if you ask me what I'm keeping my eye on, that's what we're keeping our eye on. By the way, just one last point. I will be remiss if I don't mention that one of the biggest applications of AI right now is in military applications. You ask people, that old joke about mountain climbers. You say, why do you climb a mountain? And the usual answer is, because it's there. Most really, 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 really smart scientists, with all due respect, are amoral. They're not immoral, they're just amoral. They're really, really consumed with curiosity. So if something can be done, they'll do it. Why wouldn't they? This is what they do. So there are some, there's a company called Boston Dynamics. Have any of you seen their videos? Yes, there's the one that dances, but there's also the one that shoots. AI is interesting. So yes, AI is what I'm keeping an eye on because it has ramifications across the board. Oh, by the way, I kind of love IP. All of those things are protected by IP. Holy cow.
But often protected by a different form of IP.
Absolutely. No, layers of IP. What I keep on emphasizing to the students is there are layers and layers of IP. And in fact, there are some things in last week's class, there are some things that smell like IP and act like IP are not technically IP. And the bottom line is that you are getting some kind of exclusivity, some kind of monopoly control that leads to generating some money. So just think about what there are 26 individuals in the world right now that have more wealth than 3.9 billion other human beings. There are only 7 odd billion human beings. So there are 26 individuals that have more wealth than half the human population, half the human species. Do you know the basis of all their wealth? IP. So there's a lot, it's an exciting time. That famous first sentence in A Tale of Two Cities, the best of times and the worst of times. The interface between intellectual property and what it does with an economy, that's where fun is. And that's kind of stuff that animates me. That's what I'm interested in.
And what's so fascinating to me is certainly in the internet-related spaces I live in, there's a tremendous drop in patent litigation, patenting activity. And because it's all done on a cloud, we've actually, one, stopped relying on patent and shifted to trade secrets.
Yep.
And two, we're no longer selling products, we're now selling services.
Yep.
And so all of, patent exhaustion, first sale, all that doesn't matter anymore. It's all contract, and it's just radically reconfiguring the way we're distributing value and the rules and the guardrails through which we use intellectual property to license and to create value in society is being governed by a different set of rules now. And that's fascinating to me.
Chris, we're using 17th, 18th century concepts to manage 21st century technology. How the heck is that going to work?
Right.
I mean, come on. How is that going to work? I mean, we're using concepts of property and license and ownership. I'm like, really? To manage this? Okay. Let's see how that works out. So we need what the center does, the issues that we're talking about. This is the core. This is the core of our future. And the ramifications are across the board. And not enough people, I mean, the center is doing a great job, but not enough people are thinking about these issues deeply enough and articulating views about it. We have profound sociological, profound ethical, profound legal, profound economic. The only asset class, we created an asset class out of intellectual property that we made up. Doesn't exist. Just made it up. And that asset class is the only asset class that is limitless in its growth potential. Every other asset class, by definition, has a value that is tied to its limit. So land is valuable because it's limited. Gold is limited, is valuable because it's limited. We have 2.5 billion human beings out of 7.5 billion sitting on Facebook. A third of the human species on one platform. I mean, show me any other asset class that can do that. And very few people understand it. So it's an interesting time. And I think what is happening with AI in particular is interesting to me. But more broadly speaking, is that interface between intellectual property and the economy that I find fascinating. And because we made up IP, it is the law that is the engine of what we made up. So that's why what the center is doing is so important. Anyway, that's what I'm interested in.
Well, this has been a delight to have you here with us. We're rapidly approaching the end. I want to give the students one more chance if there's anyone who wants to ask any other questions before we go.
Clear as mud.
Not at all. I think that, what I want to say is thank you. I mean, thank you not only for what you do for the school, but really for role modeling a different way of leading a career and sharing that with us. Because I think that there's a tendency to try to get yourself into certain tracks, and let's be honest, there's some very well-trod paths through our career placement office. They're very comfortable and they're well known. And what we don't know is the great variety of opportunities that are available to us, which I would say law schools as a profession are pretty bad about exposing their students to. And we are determined to make this be a dimension that can be a leader in actually trying to create venues like this. So the students who joined us today can hear stories like yours. And so we're very grateful for you to spending that time. And thank you very much. I would say, please join me in thanking Osagie, but in this case, we'll all be virtual and say thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.